Hello.
Hello.
First, I have to say hello to the audience because we have some people with us. You can't see them, but they are very excited. They're all aware that this is a live talk via Skype. Nobody expected you to be here.
It's recorded last week. Did you tell them?
Yeah. So welcome everybody to another talk, which is part of our discursive series, Political Futures. Political Futures departs from contemporary antagonisms and asks how the future can be activated and occupied as a space of possibilities and imagination. What other images, narratives, visions, and aesthetics of the political are needed in order to turn the idea of the future forward? What contributions can art offer? What role can art institutions take on in the present, considering their responsibilities as well as their limits? For me, forensic architecture is a brilliant example for a new aesthetic of the political that shows the enormous impact of architecture when it's not limited to designing buildings, but investigates the cartographies of the built world in order to find the truth. I'm very happy that you are here with us this evening in London at your home? Studio, okay. I maybe briefly introduce you to the audience. Eyal studied architecture at the Architectural Association in London. He is Professor of Spatial and Visual Cultures at Goldsmiths University of London and a founding director of the Centre for Research Architecture at the Department of Visual Cultures in 2005. Since 2010, is that correct, or 2011? I found two different
dates. Yes, there's kind of the internet is undecisive about that. It's 2010.
It's 2010, okay, then I was right. Since 2010, he's the director of the research agency Forensic Architecture, which undertakes advanced architectural and media research on behalf of international prosecutors, human rights organizations, and political and environmental justice groups. Forensic architecture is also an emergent academic field developed at Goldsmiths. Eyal is on the editorial board of the Text, Humanity, Cabinet and Political Concepts, and is on the board of directors of the Center for Investigative Journalism, amongst others. Forensic architecture's public profile has grown substantially over the past years, also due to several exhibitions at leading international art institutions. An exhibition at the ICA London led to the agency's nomination for this year's prestigious Turner Prize. And I think that's something that we will talk about later. This strange, in a way, relationship between the art institution, the exhibition, and forensic architecture as a human rights activist. I think several or most people in the audience might be familiar with the project that was part of last Documenta, but I asked some friends if they're familiar with other projects, and they were like, So maybe as a point of departure for a talk, you could talk briefly about forensic architecture, how it developed, and maybe present one or two, not to say key projects or like research, but two which are like good examples for your mode of working.
Thank you, Vanessa. Yeah, I'm happy to be there remotely with you. Wish I could be in Vienna today. I'm sure Vienna is absolutely pleasant. I remember it around this time from when I used to live there around about 10, 15 years ago. Forensic architecture is obviously a kind of a strange response to a sort of hyperbolic and somehow contradictory paradoxical, perhaps, situation that we find ourselves today, because there's something inherently, fundamentally counterintuitive about artists, architects seeking to be the police, right? Seeking to do police work. And I guess this is pointing to the fact that forensic architecture really is a kind of, it cannot have emerged in any other point in time to our understanding, because it really is a response to the challenges of the present day as we see them. Those challenges are technological and they're political. They're to do with the conception of the world in which we live. I think people in Vienna that know me know that the earlier, or the work that very directly led to forensic architecture started in human rights activism around Israel and Palestine. And working in the context of colonialism meant that the reality that you experience now with the emergence or re-emergence of the populist right and its relation to truth and is something that we've been living with for a long time. In fact, I think that the kind of the sort of post-truth, or there's other ways of calling it, environment that attack on verifiability, that attack on common sense, that attack on science, has been very much a process that has been civilianized from military frontiers and colonial regimes that are based on that. So when you grow up in the context of the struggle over Palestine, for human rights, for equality in Palestine, you realize that Israeli domination is not only taking land, settling it, stealing Palestinian land, applying violence, incarceration on Palestinian population, but it's also the continuous denying of that fact have indeed taken place. In Israel, the very foundation of the state, relying on the ethnic cleansing of Palestine in 1948, is illegal to state by law. You cannot mention the Nakba and as anyone working in the public sector in Israel. So they are working vis-a-vis denial is something that obviously becomes the challenge for political activists in other places. So how come we find ourselves left-wing activists kind of like appealing on behalf of the law and normative frameworks like human rights, doing detective work, and it's kind of seems a bit counterintuitive, only that we define ourselves as a counter-forensic agency. And that is a little bit of a difference. It's not that we are simply a civil society group that has adopted and taken over police methods. Investigating the police, that is counter-forensics, require a completely different approach. If forensics is built, state forensics, as a kind of religion, think of it as a kind of the rituals of a religion, by which a crime scene is being cordoned off, it's becoming a holy site, by which only certain kind of priests can enter this holy site, those that have the right ID or that are dressed in white, could enter into that and collect evidence. That evidence is carefully moved into a lab where certain protocols of state are being undertaken on the evidence, and the evidence is kept in a particular way, and then presented in another temple of that religion, the court, in which another ritualized production of truth and justice is articulated. This is nothing like that is similar to what we do. We cannot enter the crime scene because if the state has committed the crime, the state would actually exclude the investigators from the site. So, for example, when we investigate Gaza, the Israeli government would not allow us into Gaza. We have to rely on anything that leaks from the inside of the crime scene towards the outside. And this could be open source. There are people living in this crime scene. They can record and upload things. They can tell things. They can blog about it. They can call us and tell us, or we can meet them later and they can tell us. Or people can just hack into government archives and leak this stuff out. So you need to, the material has to find its way under the cordon, so to speak. Then we cannot follow those procedures of institutional state science because we're not equipped like that. And the evidence that we have is very partial. This is what we call weak signals. And we needed to replace the lab, the police lab, with a studio, kind of multidisciplinary place that work with also aesthetic practitioners that are tuned to image and sound and are able to compose various kind of narratives from it. And the forum is also different. Very often, sometimes we enter the court, but very often we're excluded from the court, and therefore having to find and create alternative forums, civil society forums, People's Tribunal, Truth Commissions, etc. I'll give you an example. I want to really speak about that kind of transition for a case in Israel, and I'm going to now, in fact, share screen with you and show you a case that we've been working on now for a year. A case that is perhaps much less known. And you tell me if you see my screen. Yeah, I see that you see my screen. Okay. And this case is going to demonstrate some of the conditions of counterforensic. So here, what you see here is a bunch of Israeli policemen, part of 1,000 or so at least several hundred members police force arriving at a Bedouin village at the Israeli Negev, or Nakab in Arabic, to forcefully evict it and destroy several houses. Israel wants to build a Jewish settlement on the land of those Bedouins, and this is how it looks like. Those Bedouins are Israeli citizens. Still, they're subjected to this kind of military attack. So they arrive, and in the morning, in the morning, we wake up. This is the 18th of January 2017. We wake up to this news that there was a terror attack, that one of the policemen was killed by a Bedouin terrorist. This is what the state is saying. This is the narrative. In fact, 2 people were killed during that night. One is a Bedouin teacher and a community member, husband to and father to several children living in this village, Yaqub Musa Abul Kian, and an Israeli policeman called Erez Levi were killed during that night. And the police was saying that this Bedouin man, Yaqub Musa Abul Kian, tried to kill kill the policeman and then had to be killed. So this is a tweet from the Israeli police official Twitter account, and they say security forces arrived this morning in Al-Khiran in the Negev on a law enforcement mission. A villager charged them with his car in an attempted terror attack. This is our Prime Minister. His name is Benjamin Netanyahu. And he immediately, on the same morning of January 18th, he puts it on his Facebook. He calls it a terror attack. This is the policeman that died during that night. He calls it a terror attack, and he threatened to destroy the homes of terrorists, i.e., the village members, and deny them residency. So there's a huge escalation to deny residency of those Israeli citizens who were there. This is the head of the police, and he actually says that not only that was a terror attack, it was an ISIS or Daesh terror attack, as he says in a funeral of the policeman. And then the police makes an error, and they release a tweet, and in this tweet they show what they claim to be helicopter footage, which we think is a drone footage, but never mind, which is a thermal image. Thermal image would show in black, hotter bodies of the event. They mark the terrorist car. That's a terrorist car. That's the police team. It says here the terrorist car drives slowly towards the security forces with its lights off. Now, in a thermal image, you wouldn't see if the lights are on or off, but they do look like they're off in that video. And that is kind of their case for suspecting this was a terror attack. So what we're doing immediately there is that we arrive in the morning in London in our studio. We know the people there because we've worked for a long time with the community in the Negev on land rights, on other things. We WhatsApp a lot of people, we communicate a lot of people, and we ask people to send us their footage. And we examine several dozens of videos. And the most important one was from a woman called Keren Manor, an Israeli activist who was on site as part of many groups of activists that were trying to protect that village. And she had a camera, and she was filming in another direction where this event was happening, but she captured, very importantly, the sound of the gunshots. Now, the police video is silent video. And what we wanted to do in the first instant is to match the sound onto the video so that we could put a soundtrack over it and see what we can understand about the event from it. So here is, I hope you can hear things clearly. I can see, Vanessa, you just signal to me if you do not hear the sound very well.
Okay.
Okay, we could see 3 flares coming from these are policemen, this is the car. We could see 3 flares and we could hear 3 gunshots. So we tried to, quickly we matched the flares and the gunshots. And now we're going to see, this is the car.
Okay.
See these flares? Now we're going to take a closer look at those flares. And we see that these are effectively the heat clouds coming out the end of the gun of a policeman shooting at the car before it has run over anyone or accelerated. Only at this stage we see the car starting to gain speed and driving very fast towards the policeman. And here is the point of impact where a policeman got killed. And here is the car just being brought to a standstill by another police vehicle driving towards it. Okay, so we see something very clear. The police shot the vehicle before the vehicle accelerated. So the whole story is now different. It's not like they had to kill or shoot at the resident for having ran over a policeman, but the order is different. But we still do not know exactly what has happened. But initially, here is a day later, we release our findings in a sort of activist website. And that's being picked up by the head of the Communist Party in Israel, Ayman Odeh, a Palestinian member of the Israeli parliament, who is also running the joint Arab list. So there's one, the Arab communist and other parties are forming together a joint Arab list. He's the head of it. He was there on site. He was also wounded. And he actually tweets our analysis of that and says, Yaqub Abul-Kiyan did not want to see the demolition, so he decided to drive to his mother's house. You can see his last moments in the analysis of active stills and forensic architecture. Okay. The official Israeli police Twitter, like the last troll, is actually responding to him, saying a manipulative edit, that is our edit, will not change reality. The documentation of the killing proves an intention to murder a policeman. This is one name, terror. No clip that distorts evidence will change that. I.e., they fake news us, right? They say we have manipulated. Okay, we have to continue because the question is not only who who shot first and who started, but how come the car has gained speed? It's possible that the police shot first in Yaqub Musa al-Wulkian, and he then, in retaliation, pressed the gas and drove over the policeman. So we actually had to create a reenactment. This is us going on site. This is exactly that site. You see these trees are those trees that you see here on the thermal imaging in the police aerial video. We take the same car. We place, you see those three policemen are those three members of ourselves. They wear like hats. And we try to, effectively, at that point, the autopsy report of the driver is leaked, and we know that he's shot in the leg. And the question is, why was he, given that he's shot in the leg, what would happen if he would remove simply the leg off the brake at that point in the drive, and what speed the car would gain, and whether it is the same speed. You see, the instrument of killing, the police claim, is pressing the gas pedal. That's the gun, that's the trigger. So here we simply remove the leg, and this is what we see. Okay, you see that we have exactly the same timing, i.e., if you remove the foot from the brake without pressing the gas, the car would drive down the slope in precisely the same speed. So we took away another very important intentional killing claim by the police. The acceleration is the mountain's acceleration rather than the human one. Later, we see something that, of course, this claim I'm not showing you has been widely contested and denied by the state, etc., etc. But here, what we have is we go again through all the evidence, and we find all of a sudden a piece of video that we haven't noticed before, that the Al Jazeera images from the event, they were not aware of the fact that they have captured the police car within the video. And by syncing it, we realize that they have. We find something. You actually see that this is the silhouette of the policeman, that policeman. So it's this precise moment. And something very clearly we see that the lights are on. So we take away also the other police argument, and that was that the lights were off from the car. So now they're really somehow in trouble. And that makes the headline, and the Israeli minister of the police backtracks. They say he's not, no longer claim that he was a terrorist. They understand that they killed an innocent person. Now, should they be charged, how they killed, etc.? We do not let go. So we are here now on February 24th, and we are at a moment where the police actually, after calling us fake news repeatedly, backtracks. Now, we don't want to drop the case there. We don't want to become complicit now in it, and we continue the investigation. And effectively, Karen Manor, the woman who took the first soundtrack, was, when she heard the shots, she was hiding behind something, and she switched the camera off for 14 seconds. She didn't record sound, and then she felt a bit more secure. She switched the camera on again. She didn't know where the event was, but she started capturing other bits of sound that are very important. And here is what it is. So let's listen to the soundtrack return to the video. Okay, what we see, hold on. This is the vehicle. There's huge commotion. We hear several gunshots, and we see slowly policemen getting close, very carefully and slowly, close to the car where Musa Abu Kuyan is. The horn is on. His body is likely on the wheel. You see the policeman is closing in on the car. And now we see the police getting near, we see the door opening, and we hear a shot. So we are very uncomfortable with that. We think the police has effectively assassinated the driver. We need to verify that. We just hear, the only thing that we hear is, we hear a shot, we see the door open, but we don't know that the shot comes from here. We don't know where the shot is. It's been recorded actually where Karen Manor is, next to where she is, rather than where this is. So. Okay. We return to our reenactment. This is the cousin of the deceased, and we're driving with a similar car, and this is what we discover when we let the car roll down the slope. After the car reaches 20 kilometers per hour, the door, the lock from inside automatically closes. This is very important. Why? Because once the door is locked, the driver door can only be opened from the inside. So it couldn't be, that means that Yaqub Musa Abu Kuyan was alive. He saw the policeman likely coming in and opened the door for them. So this is a very, very serious, now we're going into like the killing of somebody who is complying with the police, who is already in a very different kind of situation. Sorry. So now you would say, okay, that's pretty solid evidence that we've had, but things are not that easy. The police was forced to start an investigation of its own members, and but actually claimed that fine, it was a split-second decision. They're speaking about the first shot. It was a split-second decision. And you know the logic of the split second. It's the one that is used by countless American or US policemen when they kill innocent people, black motorists usually. They say it was a split-second decision. And you know, like the task of forensics is always to close down time, always to look at the smallest possible time frame for things to happen, to isolate that moment in time. Whereas in counter-forensics, what you want to do is to open up that split second and ask questions which are political and cultural in nature. You want to ask, why is it always the instinct of US policemen to shoot black motorists? Why should they see them instinctively as a threat? Why should Israeli soldiers and policemen likewise have always the same split-second reaction to do with Palestinian innocent people? And therefore you realize that by diving into the split second, into the molecular level of that time, you find a long history of colonialism in the case of Israel, of slavery in the case of the US, and that there is somehow a way to locate and a necessity to locate in long history those instances. In counterforensics, we never simply interested in the event itself. We want to tie the event back to the world in which it is part, pull the strings from it into much wider cultural and political framework, and make claims about them. So I don't know if you want me to show other projects, or we should move to discussion or something else. I'm totally happy to comply with whatever is necessary.
I think in this case I have one very pragmatic question. I mean, also like for the audience, who in a way finances this kind of research? Because I'm sure that you need to be as independent as possible from governments, from lobbyists, from companies, etc. And then I think you are like a rather small team, and then you work with lots of volunteers on location. Maybe you can also talk a bit of how you get your teams for these investigations.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's a very simple answer. We're financed by the ERC, it's the European Research Council, an academic grant. We're financed by human rights groups like human rights funds like Open Society, like Potter Foundation, like Siegfried Rousing and Oak. We financed by commission, not this project. This project we took pro bono. But if we have other projects, larger projects, we charge for it. And a very important source of income for us are exhibitions and lectures that we put, such as this one, where we put the proceeds into work.
That's interesting to know. I was not aware that this exhibiting the investigations is actually also like a financial source. I think this is a really interesting approach to, in a way, politely take advantage of the art world. Maybe you could show another or present another project which is a bit different from this one, because I mean you have a broad range of things you're interested in.
For sure, yeah. Let's talk about the Sretnaya project, Syrian prison that is inaccessible. It's one of the worst torture prisons operated by the Assad regime. People are executed there or tortured to death, mainly oppositionary figures, or people involved in the revolution, effectively in the first stages of the revolution, end up there. We were asked by Amnesty International to reconstruct that prison, to know how it was organized, and we had to do it because there was no information about it. We had to do it only from the memory of several survivors who became refugees in Turkey, and they were willing to speak to us. So we met them in Turkey, and we were interviewing them about that space. The problem was, so we were using things like, we were using architecture models in order to kind of like build together with them the model of the space, see how they can recall. Building the space was also a way to, building a model of the space was also building their memory. Traumatized memory usually loses several of the coordinates, but working very pragmatically on architectural software allowed memories to return. But the problem was that many of them, or all of them, effectively were blindfolded, brought in, and have never seen the building. What they did remember were the sound and acoustics. And we were working with very close collaborator of us, this guy, with this great profile, called Lawrence Abu Hamdan, and who worked, he's also an artist, and a member of several investigations of forensic architecture, and a PhD student here. And he was developing a system of reconstructing the architecture from sound. So he's now handing on to one of the survivors and headphones, and he's reconstructing here in his acoustic software various reverberation, etc., that allow us to finally determine much of the acoustics of this place. And reconstructed here is, you see Lawrence again in kind of playing various sounds to the survivors. So we were slowly able to reconstruct a kind of
so these testimonies,
a sort of a model of the building, and place a website with the testimonies of the survivors. And it was a navigable space. It was built onto kind of like an engine, a game engine, and I need another slide. Okay, here I give you an example of how building an architecture model can help witness recall an event. Here is one of the witnesses, and Hania Jamal, a Palestinian architect working with us, is trying to model the door of his solitary cell. He's put in a solitary cell with several other prisoners, a very, very small cell. And she asks how big the hatch is. This is the hatch on the door. And he answers that.
الشراقة اللي نفس الشيء اللي سميناه طاقة، شيء تحت بيسموه شراقة.
بقى قد ايه عرضها؟
عرضها بقدر.
So he said it's a bit bigger than his face, and then she asked him, "How do you know?" And it's bigger than your face, and why it is, etc. And he tell her the following story.
أنا ما فهمت. اللي مدرسة. من وين؟ اللي مدرسة من هون. أنا قلت لحالي اكذب، قلت له ما بيطلع، هو فعلا راسي بالطول ما بيطلع، قلت له ما بيطلع، قال بالعرض، بيعرف حاله بالعرض بيطلع راسي. فعملت هيك، ففعليا أنا وقت عملت هيك راسي بالعرض، مرق بالعرض يعني وقت صار العرض تبع راسي هو الطول الطبيعي. وبعد ما طلعته بالعرض رجع جلس لي بحيث جوزة حلقي على زي هي هذا الزيك تبع الشراقة بيسموه.
So the horrible description of torture emerges that was not previously recounted. And he did not tell it to his Amnesty interviewers. Sometimes traumatized memories are very repressed and not inaccessible to the people that narrate them, and somehow a very simple architectural question allowed that to emerge. Let's move into, so, you know, when you do something like that, immediately you face the kind of like fake news industry of trolls, etc., that is all over the web. So Amnesty, we did it for Amnesty. So Amnesty was attacked for a report entirely fabricated. This is our report. Amnesty hired special effect experts to fabricate the evidence. This is, we saw it in Israel, we see it now in Syria. We had actually Assad himself having to defend this against the report, and this is what he says.
The report that you have mentioned, it was a report made by Qatar and financed by Qatar. You don't know the source, you don't know the names of those victims, nothing verified about that report. It was paid by Qatar directly in order to verify and smear the Syrian government and the Syrian army.
There are a lot of eyewitnesses.
No one knows who are they. You don't have anything clear about that. It's not verified, so no.
So, yeah, in a sense, you get this wherever you go. You saw Netanyahu, you see now Assad. The kind of like the denial of crimes is part of the perpetration of them, and part of the necessity for creating, using our techniques, using the acoustics, using the video, using modeling, using various tools and techniques of our trade as aesthetic practitioners to expose these things and work together, artists and scientists, perhaps in a different way than we were used to before. It's not that as artists and scholars we're there only to problematize the truth and statements, etc., but actually putting together lawyers and aesthetic practitioners create a lot of power in investigative power, in exposing facts. And perhaps scientists and artists need to find a way of working together in a certain kind of like new 16th century in which a kind of a search for description of the natural world or physical world was undertaken in kind of much more close collaboration. And it is really that reality of fakes, of killers and liars that necessitate this kind of work. Now, I don't know, do you want, I have more work, a lot of more work. I don't know if you want me to show it.
Maybe we could briefly talk about the Grenfell Towers project, which is a bit different from the other because it's based on really like community research. In this case, you ask like all Londoners to provide photographs or video clips of this disastrous fire. And out of all these items and quotation marks, you will then produce a 3D model which will show the fire, but also I think it's a tool for understanding what has changed in the topography of London over the last years. I mean, keywords would be gentrification, privatization of housing. So this, I think, is also like an interesting approach how to address a community and also make them aware that there's like isolated bits of pieces of photos, videos, and other media they have that together they could also create like a new narrative that they could also contribute to this search for the truth.
So I think that it's necessary to understand that open source investigation, that is investigation from what people upload online, the material that is all freely available on the net, emerged as a feature of contemporary war space and the availability of smartphones and other recording devices, and is a necessity in places that sometimes we cannot get to. In Syria and Palestine, as much as we've been there and want to return to place, sometimes we cannot do that. Then when Grenfell fire happened, we looked for using the same technique that we were using previously in war zones for something very close to home. Because we wanted to change the whole notion of expertise from a single expert into a kind of a crowdsource evidence. And we knew that the Grenfell Tower was a kind of a magnet for people that are so horrified. And the response sometimes is to switch on the smartphone and to record several seconds. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those several seconds videos. But brought together, we can tell the story. So here is the video. And you can just see it. So you have all those videos of the fire. Each one shows different things, not only the fire, but residents and what's happening around. First, we build a timeline. We place them all on the timeline. And then we find a way to project, to stabilize those videos, and almost like project them back onto the building so that we have a 3D model with the videos, moving image videos on it, that we build into a platform that we can navigate on back and forth. We can just move back and forth on that platform, and then see also all other, tweets and Facebook or WhatsApp messages, in as much as we have them, of the fire, and start telling a story. 500 stories, 500 simultaneous stories of the 350 residents and the 150 firefighters that were in the building, in which no linear mode of telling that story, a textual mode, is simply, chronicling, you cannot capture that simultaneity and intersection between the different bits of evidence. And we are now at the middle of this process, and we had we sent this public call. We received several hours of videos, and now we're in the process of building this platform.
This is the project that Forensic Architecture initiated itself. Also, sounds like stupid pragmatic questions, but how many requests do you get now that people know more about forensic architecture, and how do you select a case and go in depth with your investigations?
Yeah, we have now many more requests that we can deal with. We are a small team of 15, sometimes 20 architects, artists, filmmakers, lawyers, coders. So we obviously limited. We can do about 4 or 5 investigations at the same time only. And sometimes there are
Which is already a lot.
Yeah, well, it's not enough. So we are thinking now, we're considering whether to grow or to remain relatively contained small group. We have to train a lot of people to be able to do these investigations. An architect, quote unquote, off the shelf needs a lot of training to become a forensic architect and an analytical architect. Filmmakers need to also be trained in kind of like various techniques. So it takes us a long time to train our staff. So obviously we're limited, so we need to choose. So we choose by, first of all, our political priorities. Do we think that this is a case that is important enough, can make enough of a difference? Is it a case that we can contribute to with our techniques? Not all of them. People just ask us sometimes things that are a bit unwildly, and we don't know how to help. And then we have areas of interest from homicide cases that we do, like you've seen in the Negev in the first case, or the NSU case, all the way to environmental change and urban warfare and large-scale thing. We have an affiliated group, forensic oceanography, that we work with them on migration and things that happen in the sea. So there's a lot of work, yeah. And
I mean, you're nominated for the Turner Prize. How does that feel?
We did not apply for it. We didn't ask. We were very surprised to be that. We had a tough week when we got that news. We just lost like 3 cases, and then we got a phone call from the head of the Tate, and why is our work not, like punching heavier on the political field, but the art world is kind of like so impressed by that. So we had like this kind of realization that, down in the physical world in which you need to confront powerful regimes and militaries and unjust legal systems, etc., it's very, very much harder to gain your footing. However, the Turner Prize nomination could at best promote cases, could give visibility, could help. In the worst of cases, the art world is both fabulous place of ideas and political commitment and thinking together, and it's also could be in some corners of it very superficial and very opportunistic, maybe. So you need to navigate it. There's no. We hope that our nomination is doing something also for a discourse in the art, to say, although we don't consider ourselves artists, we just say, I don't know, maybe some artists are inspired by that. And anyway, it was a kind of a poison chalice. We were very ambivalent about it, and finally we decided to accept the nomination and accept it kind of on behalf of a very large group. And we, it's a very, very long project that has many participants over many years, since 2010, including even in Vienna, Gerald, who I hope is here in the audience, I don't know, maybe not. And we were just, we wanted to fight for the part of the art world or art field that is worth fighting for.
No, I mean, personally, I think the Turner Prize nomination is a really good thing because, as you said, like you get more visibilities and you can take advantage of the fact that the art sphere is always like a privileged space, and it gets lots of attention for people, and also I think, I mean, it's a good thing to mediate what you do and make it accessible to a broader audience. And speaking of the audience, I mean, there are quite some people sitting here and they have darkness and the space, and we've been talking for 50 minutes now, or you have basically like told a lot about your project. So we have another microphone, and I would invite people, if you have questions, it's a unique chance to ask questions. Otherwise, I will just continue. You will not see people asking you a question. There's a woman in the front row, blonde, who will now ask.
Should I just ask?
Yes.
Do you mind turning around the laptop so I can see the audience?
Is it okay?
Is it okay?
Actually, maybe a bit more and a bit down. Yeah, okay.
I would just like to ask, like, how many artists you have in your team and what specifically they do, or the reason that you have artists in your team, or what you consider to be an artist.
Oh, this is very straightforward question. You know, I mean, we don't ask people, do you consider yourself an artist or not? I'm just saying we need to show on our forensic report people's qualifications, where they went to school, and you know, people went to an art school. They have MFA or other things. We list it. So that's kind of a really straightforward answer to this. Yeah, we have right now 2, I think, or 15 are self-declared, calling themselves artists. We have, no, 3 people, okay. 3 people are self-identifying themselves as artists. You know, I mean, what they do is a lot of video work. One of them, Simon Rovat, is extremely kind of sensitive to image and sound. She has a great, you know, like working very closely with images. She has a great ability to notice things very, very small at the threshold of the image, at the threshold of detectability, as we say. Ariel Kane is working a lot with spatial imaging and photogrammetry and has developed that field. There's Frank, who is both a coder and an artist, who is interested also in kind of art and data. So, I mean, it's kind of like overlapping. It's not, you know, we don't have painters on the group, but, you know, we have kind of artists that are working with technology in that sense. Obviously, this has been picked up by none other than the CDU party in Germany, when we have exposed their complicity with the Verfassungsschutz for hiding the evidence on the Verfassungsschutz involvement in the case, in the Halit Yozgat case. The thing was in Documenta. And then they have written back that we are, in the same way like Assad or Netanyahu, they were claiming these guys are artists. And here is, they took Simon's CV, and so she went to look, you know, one of the investigative team is not even a scientist. She went to do an MFA course, and that was kind of used against us, like as if that is an art. To be an artist is kind of a license to invent or work in a non-evidentiary way, but we would like to think that there is an evidentiary potential to art practices and artistic sensibility. And we never throw our artists under the bus when we attack. We own up to it. We say, yes, of course, when your evidence is filmic or sound, the best people to do that are sound practitioners and image practitioners. And this is also why it's different than the kind of the scientific lab of forensics, counter-forensics, is we need to build our truth from very little evidence that we had. I mean, it would be very hard to build a real forensic case from the audio memory of refugees, effectively. But you can build a counter-forensic case with it. And you see, we at least we forced Assad to lie on camera. We have also understood that for some months after that, the conditions in this prison improved temporarily, then they deteriorated again. It's a messy world to be operating in. Success is very, very rare. Usually it's just disappointment, but we keep at it because we don't know any other way to do politics but to persevere and to continue and push and do what we can and believe that one day we can bring a change. Hi, Daniela. I see you.
Hello. Yeah, I'm here at the back. My question is a bit direct, but it has two questions in the same question, kind of. I would say, going back to the first project, to the first example that you showed us, there was this kind of argument or like a discussion with the police through Twitter that they were kind of trying to contradict your investigation and so on. So I would ask, what amount of dead ends or do you find in your work, as you said, this disappointment, and how many traps, or how are they kind of related to government control of media, for instance, or the security or intelligence services? Not sure if you got the question, a bit complex maybe.
No, it's a great question. It's very clear. Even when you win, and most cases you lose, even when you win, it could be used against you. You get a soldier convicted, and then the state says, well, he's a rotten apple, and the state is actually good, and the military is good, and we show you how good we are we would persecute or prosecute that person. So you never know. Sometimes losing is winning, sometimes winning is losing, because the field is not a court. We do not operate legally, we operate politically. We use the court for trying to make a political point. Now, sometimes you are able to bring back a point that would have been forgotten. Sometimes you're able to politicize an issue that was seemingly technical. But you cannot expect, very often people say to me, but who cares? Why do you even bother? Because everybody knows, let's say, the Israeli army is occupying and doing this and this and that, and the Syrian army is doing this and this and this and that, and the American drones are doing this. What's the news? Why do you need to prove this? And nobody will do anything with it anyway. And first of all, I think that it's not true. I think we're operating in a time of incredible attack on, not on this or that fact. We're living at a time where verifiability is under attack. The possibility of creating facts from cross-referencing information. That very, basic Enlightenment principle is under attack. It's, I'm not saying let's return to a naive kind of positivistic conception of science. I'd say, yes, we bring scientists and artists, yes, we bring communities, we bring situated knowledge, we bring all this kind of multi-perspectival fact production. But we need to understand that we are in a situation where the very idea of verifiability is under attack, and therefore everything becomes an opinion. Is the climate changing, or actually it's becoming colder, isn't it? Or is there evolution versus creation? Maybe creation, it's like your opinion, my opinion, there's opinion. There is no, everything becomes simply at the eyes of the beholder, and that is something that is ruining a metapolitical condition, because the metapolitical condition is common world. Basic. It's not to say that's the truth and it's always be the truth and it's in a repressive way and things could change and we can adjust and we can agree on other things. But we need to understand we live in a common world. It has it's a commons. That kind of ground is a commons, like the air is a commons, like the water is a commons, and that commons is now polluted by techniques that were experimented with in the colonial frontier and now have emerged into the mainstream, into, I don't know exactly what's happening with your now neo-fascist government, but like it is, in many others, one recognizes that the politics, the right populist politics, requires to reconstruct another world, a world in which facts are not facts. And that is something that is a metapolitical condition rather than a political point. Rather than saying, we want to establish what has happened politically in this point only, we say we establish the ground on which politics can even happen.
Hello. My question is, there is several organizations who are working on forensic, like Bellingcat, I think it's one of them. But I think if you have collaborations with this kind of organizations, and second thing is, what is this aesthetics, which makes you kind of go in direction to the art spaces, and why you think that it's important?
Yeah, so we work with Bellingcat. They are really some of the best open source investigators around, and we have just completed an investigation with them on the Venezuelan state killing of the Oscar Perez. I don't know if you've seen it in the New York Times. We involve in other investigations with them. So there is, in an open source investigative community, there's various organizations. We try to kind of like work, sometimes crowdsource and help each other. Affection from my wife is something that might appear embarrassing. No, not at all. Okay. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So we work together and we do this. And what was the other part of the conversation? It was about...
The other question was about the art world.
Art
and
world.
aesthetics.
Aesthetics. Oh God, we have such a long sort of attempt to theorize aesthetics that it's kind of like, it's almost like going to take me too long to say that. We also theorists. I'm a theorist. I've written several books, and I'm kind of trying to think through the categories. So aesthetics is initially part of the kind of like the opposite of anesthetics. It's about perception. It's about increasing the perceptibility of matter and code in image, and then it is about the kind of the composition of weak signals into a case, and then it is about the forensic aesthetics is about performing your case. It's about making just performing the case publicly, so that that every lawyer is involved with rhetoric and certain theater and certain gesture, and that's all part of an aesthetics. There is no production of truth without aesthetics. It's not an add-on. It's not an annex. It's the means by which things are sensed and presented. It's an integral part of our work. What do you think? It's okay. So we see you in Vienna next time. Let me de-share the screen before more.
So I think there are no more questions. Thank you very much for this super interesting presentation. I think you have a lot of more followers from now on. I think everybody in this room will hope that you win the Turner Prize, although it might not be that important. And yeah, hope to see you soon in Vienna or somewhere else. And we say thank you.
Okay.
And goodbye.
All right.